Have you noticed how a business can start drifting even when nothing obvious is going wrong? It usually begins with a moment so small that most leaders don't even notice it. You're sitting at your desk late in the afternoon. The office is quiet except from the low hum of the air conditioner. Everything looks stable from the outside, but something in the rhythm of the decision has started slowing down. It's subtle at first, a message that should have been sent yesterday, a correction you planned to make in the meeting but decided to hold. No crisis, just a small pause where clarity used to move faster. You tell yourself it's not urgent, you address it tomorrow. You will think about the wording a little more tonight, and the day moves on. The strange part is that you already know the decision. You knew it earlier that morning, maybe even the day before. But when the moment arrives, something inside you hesitates. Not confusion, not the lack of information, just the quiet feeling that the moment might become uncomfortable. So the sentence gets softened. You add an extra explanation. You leave space where clarity used to be. It doesn't feel like avoidance. It feels reasonable, even thoughtful. But the moment has already shifted. This is where something subtle begins. A pattern that slowly appears in the background of decisions. We could call it decision drifts. Not dramatic mistakes, not obvious failures, just small moments where clarity gets softened to make the moment more comfortable. Maybe it happened earlier this week. A client asked about price. You had already decided the number. You even wrote it down on a sticky note beside your keyboard. When the question came, your shoulders lifted slightly. You felt that brief tightening across your chest. And instead of saying the number directly, you rounded it down. You explained it quickly. You said you wanted to be flexible. You mentioned that you like to work with people. The conversation continued smoothly. But later that evening, something replayed in your mind. You're standing in the kitchen, water running quietly in the sink, and the original number comes back to you. The one you meant to say, the one that would have taken 5 seconds. You repeat it quietly to yourself as if the conversation is still happening. Another version shows up inside team conversations. You noticed the pattern weeks ago, a responsibility that keeps getting missed. You plan to address it clearly, but when everyone sits down in the meeting, the air gets slightly heavier. You see the team looking back at you, waiting for direction, and the direct sentence never arrives. Instead, you ask a softer question, something general about how the process is going. Heads nod around the table. The real issue stays untouched. Later that night, the conversation reappears in your mind. You're driving home. Streetlight passing slowly across the windshield, and the original sentence returns again. It was simple, direct, clear enough to take 10 seconds. You know that moment. Most leaders eventually recognize it. The moment where the clear sentence is already formed, but the room felt just uncomfortable enough to change it. The mind moves quickly in those seconds. It searches for a smoother path, a version of the decision that won't disturb the moment. So, the sentence bends slightly, not dramatically, just enough to make the air easier to breathe. This is how decision drifts begins. The moment where protecting comfort quietly replaces protecting clarity. The pattern doesn't look dangerous at first. In fact, most people around you won't even notice it, but the business notices. The first place it shows up is revenue, not in a dramatic drop, but in a quiet drift. A few prices soften here, a few concessions there, the deal still close. For 6 months later, the calendar is full of work that feels heavier than it should. Margins tighten. The business starts carrying weights it didn't need to carry. The second place it shows up is inside the team. People learn quickly from the tone of the decisions, even when no one explains it. If corrections arise softly once, it seems kind. If they arrive softly again next week, something starts recalibrating. 6 months later, the team adjusts the standards to match the softness. Deadlines stretch slightly. Responsibilities blur around the edges. No one planned it, but the room quietly adapted. The market begins testing you. Clients start asking small questions. Requests for exceptions requests for adjustments. Each one feels reasonable by itself, but together, it begins stretching your decisions. 6 months later, negotiations take longer than they should. Every agreement requires more explanation. Clarity that once moved quickly now moves slowly. Decision speed inside the business changes next. At first, it's small. A response delayed until the next meeting. Then, it becomes another call, another discussion, another round of thinking. 6 months later, decisions that once took minutes start taking days. The weight of each moment increases, not because the decisions are harder, because hesitation has become familiar. The final shift is the one most people never talk about. It happens inside you. Every time you move away from the sentence you already knew, something small registers. Your mind notices the gap, even if no one else does. Over time, the gap begins to tame your self-trust. You start second-guessing your instincts. You start wondering if you're being too firm or not firm enough. Clarity that once felt natural begins feeling negotiable. You're thinking of a moment right now, a conversation that stayed unfinished, a message that still hasn't been sent, a sentence that keeps replaying in your mind. Most people assume leadership is about knowing the right move, but a difficult part rarely lives in the decision itself. It lives in the few seconds after the decision has been spoken. That quiet stretch of air in the room, the pause before someone responds, the reaction you can't control. Those seconds create pressure, and the instinct to protect comfort becomes strong. But leadership changes the moment you stop protecting that comfort. Not aggressively, not loudly, just steadily. You say the clear sentence, you let the room go quiet if it needs to. You allow the moment settle on its own, and something begins shifting over time. The team senses steadiness. Clients recognize clarity earlier. Decisions move faster again. Not because the business changed, because the leader stopped stepping away from the uncomfortable seconds that follows a real decision. There are always 2 parts in those moments. The comfort part, you soften the sentence, you delay the message, you buy more time. And slowly, the business begins adapting around that hesitation. Hesitation becomes the new piece of leadership. The clarity part feels heavier for a few seconds. You say exactly what needs to be said, you allow the silence, you stay in the moment. But something forms around you when you do that consistently. Your presence becomes steadier. Your decisions start landing with more weight. People stop testing the edges of your words because the room has learned that your clarity doesn't move. If you want to go deeper into this kind of decision execution, I've built a private program where we walk through this pattern directly. If you're serious about stabilizing that kind of leadership, that's exactly the work we do together private. Not adding more strategy, just strengthening the moments where decisions actually happen.